Well, everyone, Season 19 is finally here. At the time of recording this, we're actually nearly through the first week. So after the overall catastrophe that was Season of the Plunder, how is Season of the Seraph holding up? Well, it's only the first week, but so far it's mixed, so let's talk about it. Starting with PvE, the new seasonal activity, Heist Battlegrounds, is basically just a better version of the Seraph bunkers from Season of the Worthy. Granted, Heist Battlegrounds are vastly superior to Seraph bunkers, no question there. They're also a bit more difficult than most of our previous seasonal activities, which is for sure a welcome change. Thus far, the characters in the story are Anna Bray, Osiris, Clovis Bray, and Mara Sov. Our first piece of story this week was fairly interesting, with a bit of a deeper look into Osiris since he's woken up, and some entertaining dialogue between Mara and Clovis that sometimes occurs at the end of a heist. The new seasonal weapons are interesting, with the new glaive, pulse rifle, LMG, bow, heavy linear fusion, and the return of the Icalos weapons as craftables now. Most of them look promising, but the one I'm personally the most interested in would be probably either the pulse rifle or the Icalos SMG. So the seasonal weapons at least are solid enough. The downside is that the seasonal format has not changed. The exo frame works the exact same way as the Star Chart, Crown of Sorrow, and War Table. You can focus seasonal armor and weapons there, upgrade it, so on and so forth. The story is also delivered in the exact same manner. Complete a few of the main activity, then do a story mission and head back to the helm for some additional dialogue. This is one of the biggest reasons that the responses to this season thus far have been, from what I can tell, very mixed with more of a negative sentiment than positive. This format has grown tired. Granted, we do know from a tweet from Joe Blackburn that Bungie is aware of this and they're apparently working on changing things up. The issue is in the tweet, Joe stated that they're halfway done with Season 21. Logically, this means we likely won't see any major changes until Season 22. Given that we are still at the start of Season 19, this means we have at least 9 months until we see any major changes to our seasons. Of course, in theory, they could potentially revamp what they already have in Season 21, but I don't see that making sense from a development standpoint with the amount of time that would no doubt take. And even if they did, that still means that we'd still have 6 months of the same format. This is pretty discouraging. 6 to 9 months is a long time. Plus, Joe's tweet was met with a fair bit of skepticism, given that the last time we heard a similar line, it was in regards to PvP, and we've seen how that went. Post-Witch Queen PvP is a shell of its former self. It is not in a good state at all. Other than that, the new dungeon dropped, and it's easier than I would have liked, but still a lot of fun, with a very solid weapon roster and some amazing armor. Plus, the dungeon itself actually looks really fucking cool. It's one of, I would say, the better looking dungeons in the game. This might be one of the highlights of the season, because personally at least, it's probably one of my favorites, with Grasp of Avarice still being in first place. Other than that, no big changes to PvE, no new strikes, thus far at least, no new playlist activities, it's just business as usual. So how about PvP, particularly the big comp changes? Well, first off, on the bright side, shotguns feel a lot better than they did, with, shockingly enough, precision frames feeling like they benefited the most from the pellet change. Aggressive frames also feel substantially better, while lightweights don't feel as good as they did before. You'll still likely need to follow up with a melee if you're using a lightweight shotgun. Quick play is still the worst mode in the game, unfortunately. Connections are still bad, and it's still easily as sweaty as comp or trials. Plus, whatever changes they said they were going to make to improve connections has failed completely. Connections are still terrible, and everyone still plays like rats. Quitter penalties are still a thing as well, in a casual mode, for some reason. So, that being said, let's move on to comp. How is comp now? Well, as I was worried about, it's pretty well fallen flat. The only real reward from comp is Rose, and we'll talk about that here in a bit, but Rose is a participation award. You can get one just from playing your initial placement matches, and then one on each character per week just for playing comp. There's no additional rewards for reaching the higher ranks, no cosmetics, ships, sparrows, nothing. And in a game where players love to flex, that really is not a good thing. On top of that, in the current sandbox, comp is just a miserable experience. The biggest issue for the moment is just constant ability spam. In particular, Titans with Titan's Rampart barricades are probably the biggest issue overall in comp right now, but there's still plenty of invis, lightning surge, so on and so forth. AE, Airborne Effectiveness, is at least getting yet another rework at some point, and supposedly our primaries will feel like they would have pre-AE with Icarus Grip, but that hasn't happened yet. Skill-based matchmaking also pretty well nullifies the entire point of having a ladder-based system in the first place. One side note here is I would highly recommend you play with friends in a party if you're playing comp. Personally, I've found freelance to be way more frustrating. At the very least, in a party, you can communicate, and usually even the worst activities are still better with a few friends. I've been streaming comp lately with a couple of buddies of mine, linked to my Twitch in the description, and it's a lot more fun with friends and a lot better when you have people you can actually communicate with. We do now have rotating modes in comp. When you launch comp, you could get Survival, Showdown, or Rift. Showdown is probably the strongest here, Survival is still stale, and Rift has always sucked, particularly given how awful the spawns in Rift are. There's nothing as frustrating as having died trying to stop a Spark Runner, having them get close to your Rift, and then spawning halfway across the map where you're too far away to actually have a proper chance at defending your Rift. This is a particularly big issue on Disjunction, which really shouldn't be in 3v3 in the first place just due to its size. So with the sandbox still being in a poor state, and there being no real incentive to reach higher ranks, there really isn't any reason to take comp super seriously. In fact, there's no point to playing comp at all outside of getting rows every week. I was concerned that comp would fall flat, and it did. AE is getting another rework, which is good, but until ability spam is fixed, playing comp is miserable, and unless Bungie decides to do what they did with LFRs last season, we won't see any changes to abilities until Lightfall drops, so we'll likely have at least 3 months until we see ability spam addressed. That being said, let's talk about one of the things I was most excited for as a PvP player, as well as just someone who really likes guns in general. Let's talk about the new weapons. To start here, the new Trials hand cannon has a solid enough perk pool, but unfortunately is just yet another reskin. It's an annual skate with a Trials paint job, plus given the number of 140s we already have in the game, I honestly would have just much rather seen Igneous Hammer come back. The same can be said with the LMG, it has the same model as Edgewise with a Trials paint job. The perk pools are solid, but the fact our new weapons are once again just reskins is extremely disappointing. This is the second or third season in a row now where our new Trials guns have just been reskins. Pretty lame. That being said, Rose has made an incredible comeback. I really hope Bungie has learned something with the positive reception Rose has gotten, because this is how you bring back an iconic weapon. In my Black Armory video, I said that if you're going to bring back iconic weapons, you cannot do so unless they have anything short of an amazing perk pool, and Rose does. In fact, Rose might have the single best overall perk pool of any 140 hand cannon in the game, with the added bonus of having grips in lieu of an intrinsic perk, and the movement bonus of a lightweight weapon. Rose is fantastic, it feels amazing, and we'll have a video on it as soon as I'm able to get one of the rolls I want, but even my less than ideal roll with only 48 range feels amazing. Outside of that, we do of course have some new world drop weapons and new playlist weapons. The new Crucible weapon is an arc rocket launcher, the new Vanguard weapon is a stasis submachine gun, and the new Gambit gun is an arc sniper rifle. Thus far, none of those have really caught my eye, but I also haven't gotten any good rolls yet, so we'll see. Some of the new perks, such as Target Lock, do look interesting, but we'll save all that for another video. The Deepstone Crypt weapons are now craftable, so we at least have a new reason to play Deepstone. I was never a big fan of the Deepstone weapons, but hey, you might be, and if so, now would be a great time to grind for them because you're definitely going to want those craftable. The Ritual weapon is an aggressive frame pulse rifle with a solid roll. Unfortunately, the handling on it is extremely bad, but if you can mitigate that, then it might be a good choice. It's a Hake weapon, so the Hake intrinsic perk can be helpful with dealing with barricades. If it wasn't for the terrible handling, I actually think it would be a very strong weapon, but the handling does kind of ruin that. For Nightfall weapons, the Wendigo and Hungjury are returning. Not a lot else to say about those yet. I'm sure people are familiar with those by now. I was at first happy to see Hungjury come back, but with box breathing getting a nerf, I am decidedly less interested in it now. Lastly, we have new Foundry weapons as well, a new Hake auto rifle, Amalon fusion rifle, and Vice scout rifle. So overall, this season does feel pretty mid, better than the last three, but it's still too early to tell how it will turn out exactly. I think the big winners here are the new weapons, particularly the Trials guns and Rose, and the dungeon with its, again, very solid weapon roster. As far as the story goes, or if we'll get any other additional content, only time will tell. Hopefully this season gets better as it goes on, but given how our last three went, I'm not feeling super optimistic at this point, particularly with PvP. Any changes that Bungie plans on making had better happen soon, otherwise, honestly, I think Destiny's just going to keep hemorrhaging players. Unless something changes drastically this season and soon, then I have no doubt that we'll see a lower player count this season than even last season. And last season, we hit our lowest player count in Destiny's history, which was extremely concerning. But that's all for me today, Guardians. Again, it's too early to give any, real solid verdict on this season yet, so we'll see how it turns out. But anyway, if you like this video, let me know in the comments and leave me your thoughts on the new season. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.